The word denarius contains the root of day in it, and it was the day's earnings. It still is in the Old English language with LSD, D. We notice that there is a reversal of fortunes at the last count. Even so, the last shall be first, and the first last. Many go through life bathed in limelight. Some obtain that limelight very early on in life. One thinks, for instance, of the gigantic fame of some pop stars at a very early age. We also bear in mind that the eyes of millions look upon high-profile politicians all day. We also look around and see a certain careerism, even in church circles. There is an itch to get there, if we scratch underneath sometimes, for human nature has never changed. And some do get there, while others may be in the beyond, zooming far above those who were known, and no eye ever noticed them pass. I would like to present three figures. The first story is that of a bishop in America. I will not give his name, but I'll just give you an idea of what can actually happen. It might actually concern one or two of you here if you're on the receiving end. This short report was given by a lady whose picture I have before me, fairly youngish looking. I am a Catholic from such and such a diocese, and she was at this celebration for the installation of the new parish priest. Upon receiving Holy Communion, she went, as was her custom, to her knees. I genuflected out of reverence for the sacred species and remained on one knee to receive the Blessed Sacrament. The bishop refused to give me Holy Communion. You need to stand up. I was in shock and didn't move or respond. He then reached out and took hold of my folded hands, attempting to physically pull me to a standing position. You need to stand up. Please, Bishop. He then grabbed my arm and pulled me, as though to physically pull me up to a standing position. Get up! Still on one knee, I then asked very quietly and with genuine ignorance, why? As he stood up straight, he responded very loudly and sternly, because that's the way we receive communion. Now, get up, you're causing a scene. The act of receiving the Lord of Hosts is an act of great intimacy, delicacy, and gentleness. Still is his passing. The disadvantage of a person who has perhaps gone through seminary without an awful lot of tenderness is that he can miss out on certain deeper dynamics of human rapport. For handling souls is one of the most delicate operations that exist on this planet. And handling souls at the moment of the encounter with the Lord of Love is an extremely fragile and delicate moment to which one approaches on tiptoe. The second person I would draw your attention to is someone who was very well known, but deserved to be so. He was somebody who, before the time, had an intuition of the importance of getting in there, using what was out there. You will all have heard by now of Archbishop Fulton Sheen, probably eventually to be blessed Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He, by the end of his television ministry, was competed for by channels because of the ratings of his programs. About 32 million viewers were known to watch Life is Worth Living, his program. But he had a secret, which brings me to the third person. Archbishop Fulton Sheen revealed a secret at the age of 84, 2 months before he passed away, during an interview on national television. Your Excellency, you have inspired millions of people worldwide. What about you? Who has inspired you? Was it a pope? It was neither a pope, nor a cardinal, nor a bishop, not even a priest or a nun. The one who has inspired me was a small 10-year-old Chinese girl. It was then that Archbishop Sheen revealed his intimate secret by telling this story. Are you still comfortable? Then I shall begin. In a parish school in the 1950s in China, little children were learning to recite their prayers. Sister Euphrasia was teaching them. 2 months after the first Holy Communion of a number of these little pure children, and they had taken it very seriously, from the bottom of their hearts. She smiled as 10-year-old little Lee asked, "Why didn't the Lord Jesus teach us to say, 'Give us our daily rice'?" It was a very difficult question to answer. That's all they knew, morning, noon, and night. "Well, it's that bread means Eucharist," answered Sister, whose heart radiated much brighter than her theology. "You asked the good Jesus for daily communion." Without knowing it, she was actually right, because the Church Fathers do mention that from the beginning. That word in the Our Father refers to Holy Communion, epiousion, because there's also a translation, superstantiale, above the substance, supernatural bread. It's true that for your body you need rice, but for your soul, which is worth much more than your body, you need bread. That's the bread of life. In May of 1953, little Lee made her first communion, and she asked Jesus in her heart, "Always give me that daily bread, so that my soul can live and be healthy." Since then, she had received Holy Communion every day, but she was aware of the fact that bad people, the godless communists, could prevent her from receiving Christ at any time. So she prayed ardently that it would never happen. One day, they came into the school. "Right now, give us all your idols." She knew very well what it meant. Terrified, the children gave up their pious, carefully hand-painted images of Jesus, Mary and the saints. Then, in a fit of anger, the captain pulled the crucifix off the wall, threw it down to the ground and trampled it, screaming, "The new China will not tolerate these grotesque superstitions." Little Lee, who loved her picture of the Good Shepherd so much, attempted to conceal it in her blouse. It was the special image given to her for her first Holy Communion. But a loud slap on her cheek sent her crashing to the floor. The captain called her father and humiliated him before tying him up with a rope. That same day, the police made a sweep of the village, cramming all the inhabitants they could find into the tiny church. The captain proceeded to bark out a new kind of sermon, ridiculing the missionaries and the agents of American imperialism. Then, with a thundering voice, he ordered the soldiers to fire at the tabernacle. All together, and at once, the congregation drew a long breath and increased the intensity of their prayers. The captain turned back to the crowd and screamed, "Let's see how your Christ can defend himself. Here's what I think of your real presence, the Vatican's trick to exploit all you people." He grabbed the ciborium and threw all the hosts onto the tile floor. Stunned, the faithful shrank away from his gaze and choked their cry. Little Lee froze in horror. "Oh no! Look what happened to the bread!" Her innocent and righteous little heart bled for the hosts strewn all over the ground. "Isn't anyone going to help Jesus?" The captain continued his tirade of insults, interrupting his blasphemy only to let out spurts of guttural laughter. Lee silently wept. "Now, get out! And woe to the one who dares to return to this den of superstition. He'll answer to me." The church quickly emptied. But besides the angels, always present around Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament to adore him, there stood another witness who had not missed a moment of the drama. It was Père Luc from the Missions Étrangères de Paris. That's the French missionaries who were very much present in that part of the world. 1 month previously, foreseeing the takeover of the village, the parishioners had hidden him in a small recess of the choir, which gave him a view of the church. He sank into prayer of atonement for the sacrileges committed against Jesus, and suffered because he was not able to come to his defense. One wrong move on his part, and the parishioners who had hidden him would be arrested for treason. "Lord, have mercy on yourself," he prayed in anguish. "Stop this sacrilege, Lord Jesus." Suddenly, a creaking sound broke the heavy silence in the church. Slowly, softly, the door opened. It was little Lee. Barely 10 years old, there she was, approaching the altar with the tiny steps of a Chinese girl. Father Luke trembled. She could be killed any moment. Unable to communicate with her, he could only watch and beg all the saints in heaven to spare this child. The little girl bowed for a moment and adored in silence, just as Sister Euphrasia had taught her. She stayed with Jesus in adoration for 1 hour, knowing that she was supposed to prepare her heart before receiving him. Her hands joined together, she whispered a mysterious prayer to her dear Jesus, mistreated and abandoned. His eyes glued to her, Father Luke stared as she lowered herself down to her hands and knees, and with her tongue took up one of the hosts. She remained there on her knees, eyes closed, turned inward, face to face with the heavenly friend. Each second seemed an eternity to Father Luke. He feared the worst, if only he could speak to her. But soon the child went out, just as quietly as she had come in, almost hopping along. The purging continued as the volunteer brigade searched the entire village and surrounding area. It was happening all over the new China. The peasants didn't dare to move. Hiding in their bamboo homes, they knew nothing about the future and couldn't take tomorrow for granted. Yet, every morning, our little Lee slipped away to find her living bread in the church, reproducing the same scenario from the previous day. Each time she adored for 1 hour and then took up one host on her tongue and disappeared. Father Luke was chomping at the bit. Why didn't she take them all? He knew exactly how many there were, 32. Doesn't she know she could pick up several of them at once? She didn't know. Sister Euphrasia had been very clear about that. 1 host per day is enough. And never touch the host. We receive it on the tongue. The little girl perfectly conformed to the rules. One day, there remained on the ground only 1 more host. At daybreak, the child scurried into the church as usual and drew near to the altar. She knelt to the ground to pray, very close to the host. Father Luke had to muffle a cry. Suddenly, a soldier, standing in the doorway, aimed his gun at her. A single dry pop was heard, followed by a loud burst of laughter. The child immediately collapsed. Father Luke thought she was dead, but no. He watched her struggle and crawl up to the host. He saw her put her tongue over it. Then a few convulsions shook her body before it finally relaxed. The last shall be first.